Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today we're still kind of working on getting our milling machine set up to cut these spiral gears or helical gears, whatever you want to call them. And I ran into a little snag and ended up spending some money and buying a new dividing head to go with my mill. And I don't know that it was absolutely necessary, but really and truly, I think at the end of the day, it probably needs to have happened, and that's what I ended up doing. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about the differences in dividing heads that were offered by Kearney Trecker, which is what the kind of mill I have is a Kearney Trecker, or what we often call a K&T, or often called Milwaukee mills. And K&T basically made two different flavors of dividing heads during most of their lifetime. There actually is some earlier versions of dividing heads that are out there, but these two are by far the most common ones that you'll come across. The smaller one down here is a Model H dividing head. The larger dividing head here is a Model K dividing head. And I'm going to go into a little bit of differences between these and why I ended up picking up this Model K dividing head right here. I will say that it's kind of irony. Probably a couple of months ago, I had a viewer that had stumbled across a Model H dividing head that was for sale up near here. It was a pretty good price, pretty good deal. I ended up buying it even though I really didn't need it. I already had a Model H dividing head. And about the time we got everything worked out and he got it shipped down to me and everything else, it got into the shop, I came to realize what I really need is a Model K dividing head. So I also picked this one up. And again, this one was from a viewer. I knew that he had it. He had contacted me sometime back and told me he had one for sale. And I was actually trying to help him find someone to buy it. And the deal ended up falling through. And he still had it. So whenever I contacted him, he said, yeah, I still have it. So I worked out a deal with him and got this. So both of these dividing heads are actually new to my shop, and I already had one Model H over here that is set up on my mill. I will say that one of my Model H's is about to be leaving the shop. I've actually got somebody that wants to purchase it, purchase one of them. So, and he hasn't come by to pick it up yet, but will get me back down to one Model H, but I've also got this Model K. The Model H that is on my mill, I'm going to have to hang on to that one. It really doesn't belong to me, but so I can't really sell it or give it away or anything, so I'm going to hang on to that one. But this Model K will probably become my main go-to dividing head going forward. So before we get too deep into this, I want to kind of mention a little bit about the Model H and the Model K designations on these dividing heads. And if for people that are familiar with the K&T mills, that matches the mill models that they had, the two main mill models that they had for their horizontal mills. They had these H's and K mills. Actually, they were offered in either horizontal or vertical configurations, and they also, in the horizontals, they came in both what's called a plain configuration and a universal. My mill is the universal mill here. You can actually rotate the table on it. That's the biggest difference between the universal and the plain. The plain mill just goes square or perpendicular to the cutter, I guess you could say. There's really no adjustment in there. And then, of course, they had a vertical model, which was like a big vertical mill. Basically had the same taper, but it came straight up and down for doing more top milling work. And they offered those mainly in a Model H and a Model K designation. And it is a little bit confusing because, like, this here is a Model H mill. This is a 3H mill. So in the Model H mills, they had the 2H, they had a 3H, they had a 4H, and they had a 5H, and I think they even may have had a 6H. Although as the numbers went up, the mills got larger and larger. The 2H mill, which is the one that was a size smaller than this one, I used to have a 2H mill in my shop, but was by far the most common mill that K&T made. They made thousands and thousands and thousands of them. In fact, during World War II, the Model 2H mill was in such high demand that for the war effort, they actually converted another company, I can't remember who it was, but there was another company actually converted their shop over that all they did was manufacture 2H mills. Whereas the Kearney Trecker plant, they were making the 2H mills plus the other size equipment as well. After the war was over, of course, as was common with war effort, a lot of these different plants that were out there, they got converted from making stuff for the war effort. So, an automobile factory might be making tanks or airplanes, et cetera. In this case, there was such a demand for these mills for making war production that another company actually made these mills for K&T and sold them for the war effort. But the 2H is by far the most common size. This is a 3H. And early on, there was K&T had a Model H mill and a Model K mill. The Model H was the size of the 2H. The Model K mill was the size of this one, which is a 3H or a 2K. And it is a little bit confusing. The difference between my Model 3H and a Model 2K milling machine is basically the gearing down here with the speeds that had a different range of speeds. It's interesting that when you look up the serial number on this one, K&T made machines in lots, so they might make a lot of 50 machines at one time. And if you look, there's this serial number is, 28-5000. So this was lot 5000, this was machine 28 and 5000. I think there was 50 machines in this lot. And but when you look up that lot 5000, it actually says Model 2K milling machine. So the castings and everything were identical. They just, the guts that went on the inside of it were a little bit different, but they were pretty much the same milling machine. There were a couple other features. For example, the Ks typically had side controls, whereas the H's didn't. This one here, because I think it was made with a lot of Model K mills, it has some of the features of the Model Ks, but also some of the features of the Model H's. Kind of confusing. But again, the 2H, there was no Model K in that 2H size. Then you had the 3H 2K, the 4H 3K. They kind of went up from there. But the dividing heads also kind of took that same nomenclature, whereas the Model H dividing head was really designed for that 2H milling machine. The Model K was designed for the Model K milling machines, which started at the 2K, in this case, the 3H. Yeah, I'm probably confusing you. It's confusing to me too. I have no idea why K&T numbered things the way they did, but that's just the way it is. But larger dividing head goes on a larger mill here, and typically the Model K dividing heads would be ideal for any of the Model K milling machines, or on the Model H milling machines from a Model 2 or 3H up. You'd really want to use a Model K dividing head ideally. They'll both work on either one. Keith Fenner has a Model K dividing head that he's using on his 2HL, which is even a smaller version than the 2H. So they'll both work either way, but there are some differences and some things that really make this more ideal for this size machine. So when you look at the Model H dividing head and the Model K dividing head side by side, the first thing and the most obvious difference between the two is that the Model K is obviously a larger dividing head than the Model H dividing head. Again, larger mill, larger dividing head. You got a little bit more capacity, it's a little bit beefier, a little bit more heavier duty. But the really probably the biggest difference between the two is mechanically. If you notice, the dials on these are very different. And the way these dividing heads are geared are very different as well. I should mention that what is the purpose of dividing head? The dividing head's purpose is if you're cutting, say, gear teeth or splines on the shaft, you need to be able to rotate that part a certain increment each time. And typically on a dividing head, this is done by the number of increments you want. And you can come in here on this plate and you basically turn your dial. You notice it's turning up here. You turn it so far. It's got pins back here, and depending on the number of teeth you want to cut in a gear, you go a certain revolution on this, and it will give you a very precise increments of cuts. So again, used mainly for splines on shafts, gear teeth, or anytime you need to move something a certain increment. It's really not doing it in degrees of a circle. It's doing it more in increments of a circle. So again, if you got 30 teeth you want to cut, you would have a certain set that you would move this to give you that spacing that gave you 30 equal cuts. But the big difference between these two is the gear ratio. The Model H dividing head has a 40-to-1 ratio in its handle down here. So when you have to turn this handle 40 times to make one revolution of the chuck. Okay, and again, you got plates on here, and there's a book we can look up to see what we need to do for whatever divisions we're wanting to do, which hole pattern we need to use, and how many increments. On the Model K dividing head, it is a 5-to-1 ratio. So you see it's turning much faster. Every 5 times I turn this handle, it will turn the chuck one revolution. And again, they've got all the things worked out so that you can figure out the spacings or whatever for whatever you want to do here. There's also these little tail stocks coming off the end, and this is for cutting like spiral gears or helical gears where you've got need for that part to turn while it's cutting. And if you turn this handle on the end, notice that it's turning the chuck over here with it, as well as this whole face. So you do this, you back out, you know, it's turning that chuck proportionally. Then you come in here, you index how far you want to go to the next cut, and then come in here and it will spiral. This is what we're going to attach to our lead attachment over here on the mill to give us that spiral cutting. For normal gear cutting, where you're just cutting a regular tooth, you tighten this face up and it won't allow you to turn this. It basically just locks it in place. You loosen this up and it will actually let you turn that. So, but 40-to-1, 5-to-1 is the biggest difference here between the twos. The tailstock down here is, as far as the lead goes, both of these, the ratios and everything are the same. So it doesn't really matter. You turn this dial the same amount on either one, and it's going to move that chuck around while it's in the lead mode for cutting spiral gears. But that's the biggest difference between the two. So why did I need this one? Why did I want the bigger one? Let's talk about that. So this is what's called a lead attachment, and this is what I was talking about that will turn that chuck while it's machining in order for you to cut those spiral gears. And this is basically tied into the screw on the table. So as the table is feeding and moving across, it comes into this gearbox, and you can change the gear ratios to change how much it's going to turn that chuck simultaneously. Now I've got my lead attachment set up over here. This is for my 3H mill, or the Model K size lead attachment, and it is going to a Model H size dividing head. Now, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but one of the problems that I have, it's not really a problem, but it is one thing that's very noticeable. In fact, let me move you around here, I'll show you. If you look, when I lay this up on here, the hole patterns don't match the slots in the table. Now I can bolt down to the center slot, that's fine, but the two on the outside, they don't really line up. So is that a major issue? Well, for just cutting regular gear teeth or whatever, where you're not having to spin things around, it's not. You just bolt it down in the middle. You really can't bolt it on the ends, but you can get plenty of clamping pressure to do that. This is the Model H dividing head, but now with the Model K dividing head, these all line up to the slots, and it actually fits the mill a little bit better. But here's the bigger issue that I have. Again, we have the lead attachment over here. There's a drive shaft that goes over to the dividing head that turns this piece on the end. Everything's in time, and of course you change the change gears in here as needed to get you the right lead. But if you look, I hope you can see it, it's not a straight shot. This shaft is actually going downhill a little bit. It doesn't line up. The Model H dividing head does not line up perfectly to the lead attachment that's designed on this Model K size mill. So it's actually pointing down, and you guys probably can't see it in the picture, but it's also kind of tilting forward. So this thing's going at an angle between the two. Now, will it work? It'll probably work just fine. It's not off by that much, but I noticed that whenever I put this coupler on, that I had to take a hammer and bump it on because it was really tight. And I was like, why is that? And then after I kind of stood back and looked at things, it's like, oh, it's not going straight on. So this is the main reason why I decided to upgrade my dividing head, is so that I could get this shaft going perfectly straight rather than at this awkward angle. And I just feel like it's just going to work a little bit better, hopefully. Again, probably wouldn't matter, but it's really not an ideal situation. And I want to make sure that we got everything lined up exactly like it should be. So that is the main reason why I went and found a Model K dividing head to go with this mill, was specifically for this job and doing this spiral cutting. And hey, I'll use that dividing head from now on. If I ever do more spiral cutting, I'll have the proper dividing head to line up and fit with this lead attachment. Now, from what I can tell, as far as the gearing and the ratios and all that, the Model H and the Model K lead attachment, the gearing on the inside is identical. So there's no difference in how that's going to impact how much is turning that part. In fact, I looked in the manuals for both of these and looked at the change gear configuration that we needed for the lead that I needed. It's the exact same setup. So when K&T did this, they didn't totally redesign this thing so that you had different gears and everything else. In fact, the gears even between the Model H and the Model K lead attachment are interchangeable, but the actual case is a different size. They fit up on a different piece, and obviously the spacings are a little bit different between the two. That's the main differences between them. All right, so far it's been a lot of talking, a lot of theory, a lot of just talking about these differences. Now what I want to get into is we're going to actually change these out and get the Model K dividing head up on here. So I've just got a couple of bolts here going down to T-slots that are kind of attaching this in place. There's one on the front, one on the back, and we're going to loosen that up. And hopefully, yeah, this dividing head will just move forward. And I got this drive shaft in here that's kind of connecting the two together, and I'm going to go ahead and just pull that out for right now. And there's just a coupling on here that connects the two. All right, this dividing head is ready to go. I need to figure out where I'm going to go with it. I can pick this one up by hand. It's heavy. I can handle it. That Model K dividing head is a little bit larger, so I'm probably going to have to get my engine hoist over here to actually pick it up and get it up onto the table. It's just too heavy for me to handle by myself, and my gantry crane doesn't really fit over this, so we'll use the engine hoist for that. Let me get this one out of the way. We'll get the other one ready to put up here. All right, I think I can get this moved over here without having to get my engine hoist out. I've got my table lowered down as far as it'll go, and this is on a lift table. I got it up as high, and there's probably about 2 inches over here difference between the two, but I think I can kind of get it up on here. Yeah. There we go. All right. All right, that lines up with my slots in the table, and everything just looks better, so I'm happy with that. Now, one thing I do notice right away is that on my other dividing head, I have little some guides in the bottom that get this lined up in the slots. This one doesn't appear to have those on there. I'm sure that it has the holes and the stuff in the bottom for it. I'm going to turn this up on its side. Let me look at the bottom. I may, if they'll take off, I'll probably take the ones off of the other dividing head and put on this one. It just helps speed up alignment. So let's see, I think I can roll this over toward me this way and get the bottom where I can see it. All right. Well, I got this side up. I want to take this opportunity to get that bottom cleaned up real good. Just using some degreaser there. In that case, I was actually using Windex, which is basically a degreaser. Get all that cleaned up. And then I'm going to take my precision ground flat stones and we'll stone the bottom of this. as well, just to, yeah, that feels kind of rough. It's amazing what just a couple of swipes with these stones will do to get a surface cleaned up and running flat again. That feels so much better. I pulled these keys off of my other one. Notice we got two grooves in here, one 90 degrees to the other one. We're going to be going with this one and get that lined up. Here we go. Get that one lined up. I stole these right off the bottom of the other dividing head. You can easily make these. They just need to be the right size. All right, that'll make lining that up much easier. You guys can see that while I'm in here working hard, Marion and Ginger are also working very hard. They actually had the night shift out here in the shop, making sure it was safe and clean. So they rest during the day and they work real hard all night long while I'm not out here. So give them a little bit of a break here and let them enjoy their nap. It's always good practice to stone your tables. Just make sure you don't have any burrs. And even though I stone this table pretty regularly, I can still see some little high spots polishing up here where you got little dings and stuff in here. So it really makes a difference. We can roll this back over. Let's see here. And that fits right down in the slot. And very little side by side. You can get nice alignment there very easily. So on the end of the tailstock here, we have this little knob that lets you turn this by hand. We want to take that off because there's a spline up underneath it that will allow it to actually connect over to the lead attachment. So we just unscrew this, and this little handle should just come right off. This is often missing on these, but nice to have it. This used to have, originally it had two handles, one on each side, but one side's broken off. No big deal. Really don't use it that much. That's what the handle looks like with both sides. That's the one off of my other dividing head. This coupler will fit right up on here. Here we go. So this is the shaft that goes between these. It's just a spline shaft. When I got this lead attachment, it was actually missing this little shaft in the top that the gears go on. I had to remake all of that, and I was also missing this shaft. But I was able to find a shaft on eBay that was the right size, but it's a little bit long. I think I'm going to go ahead and just cut this thing off so that I can get this dividing head back a little bit. I need to kind of figure out about where I want it, probably about right in there. I don't know, maybe even a little bit closer. Kind of like the idea. I think what I'm going to do is make this one 2/3 the length and have 1/3 left over. That way, if I want to, I can move it back even farther. Yeah. So the shaft was about 18 inches long, and I turned it into a 12-inch and a 6-inch shaft. I think that'll just make life a little bit easier. And let's slide that up. That fits perfectly in that coupler. I got a coupler on this end. Slide that in there. And look at that. Notice we got all of our holes perfectly aligned now with the table. We'll go ahead and clamp this down. I got a T-slot in there, T-nut in there, and we'll get one tightened down here on the back. And I think on the front, I'll do the two corners will have 3 points of contact, which will be plenty. I'll get that done, and we should have this all bolted down. Well, I just realized I ran into a problem. I think we can work around it. So when I got this dividing head from the gentleman that I got it from, he told me he didn't have the foot stock, or some people call it tail stock. It's actually a foot stock that goes with this dividing head. But he said he had one that would work with it, so he sent that one along. This is the one that came off of the Model H dividing head, and you can see, well, number one, it's lower, but this is adjustable. I can adjust it up, but it's not on center with the shaft. On the Model H, it's in a different position. So this is the tail stock that he sent. I believe that this is a Kearney Trecker tail stock, just because it's nearly identical to this one, but except for one thing. This one, it is offset. Notice if you line it up here, it even brings it over farther this way. Problem is that it needs to be offset in that direction. I thought, okay, well, I can just flip this thing around, and that's going to be pretty darn close. The problem is that because of this key, I really can't flip it around. I think I can get by for right now. I can just put this in here. I need to adjust it, and I can just toe clamp this down to the table. It'll work, but it's not ideal. I would like to find one that aligns. So if anybody knows where a Model K footstock is that is correct for this setup, I would love to find one. But in the meantime, I can make this one work. All this is doing is giving support, so even if it's out of alignment a little bit one way or the other, it's not going to matter. I can get it pretty much right on there. But I will just toe clamp this down for right now, and that'll get the job done. And you can see that moves in and out, so you can move your part in and out. Well, that's a little clunky, but it'll work, and it'll serve its purpose. All we need to do is get that support out there on the end, and I think we have accomplished the goal there. And dividing head part works. Let's make sure that we got the lead going here whenever we fire the table up and get her moving. All right, so we will engage the spindle, then I'm going to engage the feed, and when I do, notice we're turning down here, we're turning here, and our gear is slowly rotating. And then when we back out, it will reverse back out. And of course, we can index this totally separate from the lead. But everything appears to be working like it should. And we have proper alignment down here to boot. So I think this dividing head is going to be just a trick. So next thing I want to do is get my dividing plate set for the gear that I got to cut. And the gear I got to cut is a 30-tooth gear. Now I've got a copy of the manual here. This is Model K dividing head manual. This came right off of my website at VintageMachinery.org. We have lots of manuals and stuff on there. There's also one on there for the Model H dividing head. And if you look in here, there is all the charts and tables to set this thing up. You can find your charts for your leads like we talked about before, but right now for plain indexing, we just need to figure out which plate we need to use. So there's a chart here. I go to 30 teeth, and it tells me that I can use on plate number 1 or plate number 2 either the 78 hole circle or the 96 hole circle. And looking at my plate, the plate with the 96, the plate number 2 is on there, so we're going to go with that 96 hole circle. And what we need is 16 holes between each turn. So you'll turn it 16 of those 96 holes, and you'll do that 30 times, and you'll have a perfect 30 tooth pattern on there. Zoom 21. So now we're looking at the plate here. I will note that on this Model K dividing head, there's actually 2 plates that are in here together that stay on here together. They're back to back to one another. I'm not sure if it's actually 1 plate or 2 separate plates. I haven't taken it apart, but there is another plate on the back side. You just flip it around. On the Model H dividing head, 1 plate is just one-sided. But I look on here, they're Right here it tells me the number of holes, so that's got 100 holes. This second line has 96, and that one's 92, 94, 72, what was that, 66, 60. So that's the number of holes in that plate. We want to go to the 96 plate, and I'm going to move my little scepter ring right there. And what we need to do is get the pin so that it's lined up in that circle. Right now it looks like it's lined up on one of those circles down here, so we'll just loosen this nut and get it in that 96 pin hole. So we're just going to loosen this up, and when I do, you see this slides up and down in here, and I'm just going to get it lined up in that second hole pattern, and we'll tighten it back up. And then the next thing I need is to adjust the scepter here. There's these two arms. I got it on the first one, and we need to set this one to easily find my 16 holes. So I go 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 right here. Just circle it and make it easier to find. I'll also note that in the manual, it said that every 10th hole will have a circle around it. So that's 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can more easily find it. Notice we all start with a circle on the first run here, 10 holes over in 6. There we go. And we'll put it right there, and we'll tighten that back down. And what that allows is when I'm in this pin, I can just pull it out, go over here until it bumps up against that scepter. Then I slide this around to the next one, and it just allows me to index all the way around this thing, etc., etc. I'm not going to do it all the way, but you kind of get the idea. And that's where we start. All right. I think we're set up for 30 holes. Well, there we go. One Model K dividing head set up and ready to go. I feel a little bit more comfortable doing this job now that I have my drive shaft rather, lined up properly. That did slow me down just a little bit. Had to go out here and find the right dividing head for this job, but I'm glad I got it. This is something I've actually been wanting an excuse to get for a while, and when this job came up, went ahead and just bit the bullet and got the right dividing head to go on this machine. So it'll definitely get used a lot. I do quite a bit of gear cutting and gear type work, so be definitely a handy thing to have. So there you go, the difference between a Model H and the Model K dividing head, getting one set up here with the lead attachment, and we're ready to move on with this project. Up next is getting everything set up. I can already tell, guys, that I'm going to have an issue here with the table going at this 45-degree angle. By the time I get this all the way up next to the cutter and get the gear under the cutter, there's not going to be enough clearance to clear the overarm support and all that. So the other option is just to take the table, put it back at 0, at 90 degrees rather, and put my universal head on here and turn the cutter to 45 degrees. So coming up next, we'll probably be getting the universal head set up and mounted on here and getting it ready to make that angled spiral cut. All right, guys, with that is a wrap. As always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thumbs up and comments, greatly appreciated. Hit that bell icon up to get notifications when new videos are posted. Big, huge thank you to all the supporters out there who support the site through Patreon, PayPal, etc. And guys, with that, we will catch you on the next video. Again, thanks for watching.